What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Paul Brettel here. As always, thank you for joining me. On today's video, we are a week into Green Bay Packers training camp practices, so we're going to discuss where I feel the big positional battles that are taking place at within each position group currently stand now that we are 6 practices in, 5 of which have been at full speed, and 2 of those have been in pads. But before we dive in, as always, you can find my work over at Dairyland Express as well as Packers Wire. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. And please hit subscribe, hit like on the video. I do greatly appreciate it. So now let's dive on into the position group, starting with the backup quarterback. So each day of practices so far, the backup quarterback's been Danny Etling, not Alex Magoo, not Sean Clifford, but Danny Etling. And what this says to me is that the Packers are really considering keeping a third quarterback on the 53-man roster. Obviously, Jordan Love's the starter. Sean Clifford, the Packers just spent a 5th-round pick on him. I find it hard to believe that there's going to be a world where in his rookie season, knowing that he's inexperienced, that they would just cut him. I feel that he's going to be on this roster. And the question comes down to, can Alex Magoo or Danny Etling push for the Packers keeping that third quarterback? So to me, that's what this is. It's an audition for Etling. It's an audition for Magoo to show that they should be on this 53-man roster. Next up at running back, the third running back spot, as we all know, is open. Tyler Goodson, Lou Nichols, Patrick Taylor are the 3 main guys battling for that. And if I were ranking them 1, 2, 3 in terms of who I think the favorite is, that's how it'd go: Goodson, Nichols, and Patrick Taylor. As they say in football, the more you can do. And Tyler Goodson is absolutely bringing that element to the Packers offense. You name it, he's probably done it so far in practice, whether being a ball carrier out of the backfield, whether being a pass catcher, lining up in the slot, lining up out wide, or as a gadget player used on end arounds, jet sweeps, being a motion man, which I believe I've talked about on here before, is a role within this offense that I think is going to have more responsibilities, is going to be more prominent this season, because it can do a lot for the quarterback. That pre-snap motion, those gadget type plays can do a lot in terms of, one, creating some big play potential. You're getting a playmaker, a speedster, the ball in his hands, in space, on the move, could lead to some big plays, but also it's what it does to the defense. Sending that guy in motion creates some potential confusion for the defense. They have to make last second adjustments. Those adjustments that they make could tip their hand to Love, the quarterback, the rest of the offense, about what the defense is planning to do on that play. And at the snap, it can create some hesitation as well. And as we know in the NFL, that split second of hesitation is all it can take to open up a passing lane or for a blocker to get in better position. So I think that's a role, like I said, that's going to be more prominent, and Tyler Goodson's very much filling it so far. Lou Nichols, as a ball carrier, has displayed some good vision, good burst. He's a physical runner, but he's struggled in the passing game. He's seemingly had at least a drop in several of the practices so far. And then Patrick Taylor, he just does not have the same upside on offense that Nichols and Goodson bring, although he may be the more well-rounded special teams player. But this season, I'm not sure that that's going to be good enough like it was last year for him to make this team. The back end of the receiver room, I consider the first 5 spots to be locked up. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Maury Toure, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks hasn't practiced since Thursday of last week due to a concussion. But again, Packers spent a 5th-round pick on him. I don't see them trying to cut him and then get him onto the practice squad. I feel like he's going to be on this team, and it's probably going to be more of a developmental role for him this year as he navigates his rookie season. As far as that 6th spot goes, nobody has consistently stood out. We all know that Malik Heath made a lot of noise during offseason programs. Seemingly there wasn't a practice that went by that wasn't open to the media where we didn't see him making a play. But those flashes haven't been as consistent since training camp started. Bo Melton had a moment, caught a deep touchdown pass from Alex Magoo in Monday's practice, I believe it was. And then there's Grant DuBose, who hasn't practiced at all. not since OTAs, offseason programs. Up to this point, Matt LaFleur told us at the beginning of training camp that he's currently dealing with a back injury and he's on the non-football injury list. So those are the three names to watch in terms of who could push for that 6 receiver role. And again, with Bull Melton's speed, I believe he ran like a 4.34 coming out of Rutgers, extremely fast. I haven't seen him used in this capacity, but again, going back to that gadget, that motion roll, potentially someone with speed who could take some snaps in that capacity as well. But again, I haven't seen enough consistency from this group. And if I were putting together a 53-man roster prediction right now, I would only keep 5 receivers for the reasons mentioned, but also that 6 receiver, their role within the offense is going to be likely non-existent or very, very small. Again, there's those 5 receivers that are ahead of them on the depth chart. The Packers, as I've talked about on here before, I'm expecting a heavy usage of 12 and 21 personnel, or 2 tight ends, 2 running backs on the field at the same time. This just isn't going to be an offense where we see a ton of 5 wide or 5 pass catcher sets. And if we do, I think guys like Luke Musgrave are, at the tight end position are going to be a part of that. So the running backs are active in the passing game. The tight ends are active in the passing game. I just don't see there being a significant role for that 6 receiver. So I do think that roster spot could be better utilized elsewhere. On the offensive line, Zach Tom, where is he going to go in terms of those roster battles? And at right tackle, he's been the primary starter over Yosh Nijman up to this point. We've seen a large enough sample size of practices as of now versus a week ago when I was commenting on this position battle to say that he is absolutely the front runner for right tackle. But then on Tuesday, he took his first snaps at center with the first team offense. There's definitely some competition there. And, Zach Tom played center his first 2 seasons at Wake Forest. His final 2 seasons there were at left tackle, but something that still sits with me that Brian Gutekunst said earlier this offseason, when they were evaluating Tom prior to the 2022 draft, the Packers evaluated center as his best position. So I do think he's going to get opportunities to start there over Josh Myers. And when it comes to where do they play Tom, at center, at right tackle, because in my opinion, and I'm sure many agree, he is one of the best 5. Matt LaFleur talks about we got to put the best 5 offensive linemen on the field. That includes Zach Tom. The question is, where's it going to be? Well, offensive line play is very much the sum of the parts are greater than the individual. You can have a really, really good left side, but if the right side's not very good, the overall offensive line unit's performance is not going to be very good. So when evaluating where Tom's going to go, where's the greatest talent gap? Is it between Tom and Myers at center, or is it between Tom and Nijman at right tackle? Ultimately, more of this has to play out, specifically at center, before we can really begin making that determination. But that's how I see the Packers, Matt LaFleur specifically, Adam Stenavich, going about making that final decision. Lastly, on the offensive side of the ball, tight end. Not a ton going on here in terms of positional battles. We know who the 4 players on the roster are going to be: Musgrave, DeGuara, Davis, and Kraft. And like I said on the previous video, I see all 4 of those guys having roles within the offense this season. Over on the interior defensive line, again, this is more of a numbers game, a numbers battle. Do the Packers keep 5 defensive linemen, or do they keep 6? As Brian Gutekunst said, the anchors of this unit are Devontae Wyatt, TJ Slayton, and Kenny Clark. Kobe Wooden is going to be a big part of this rotation as well. Those are going to be the big 4 that we see the most playing time from. Carl Brooks, again, a draft pick by the Packers, actually had a really, really good practice on Monday, making his way into the backfield on several occasions. I don't expect him to see a ton of snaps in run defense this season, but a versatile defender lined up in the A gap, the B gap, as an edge rusher during his time in college. I could see them using him in obvious passing situations. So there's 5 right there. The question is, can Jonathan Ford, can Chris Slayton stand out as the 6th interior defender to, make the Packers want to keep one of them on the roster? And if they're going to do so, in my opinion, it comes down to, can they make a difference against the run? As Brian Gutekunst said, this interior defensive line unit, they have plenty of pass rush options, and they absolutely do. Clark, Wyatt, Wood, and Brooks. Add Lucas Van Ness to the mix if he takes some snaps inside. But TJ Slayton is their primary run defender. Those other guys mentioned are going to have to step up in that capacity, but more depth is needed. There's big questions in that regard to this position group. So can Ford, can Slayton hold up well against the run? Because that's going to be their path to making the roster. At edge rusher, this position group is similar to defensive line. Are they going to keep 5 or are they going to keep 6? Preston Smith, Justin Hollins, Lucas Van Ness, JJ Enagbare, they're going to be on this team. Add Rashawn Gary back into the mix once he's healthy. That's 5. That could be as many as the Packers choose to keep. If they go to 6, that's going pretty heavy at the edge rusher position. But there's Brenton Cox, someone who Matt LaFleur mentioned during offseason programs, OTAs, and minicamp that had stood out with his performance. He's a really, really high upside player. Production in the SEC against both the run and the pass. And because of that potential, because of that upside, I could see the Packers putting him on the roster similarly to what they did with Caleb Jones, the offensive tackle, in 2022. Caleb Jones was a rookie last season, went undrafted out of Indiana, and I believe the Packers kept him on the 53-man because they felt that if they put him on the practice squad, some team was going to sign him away. They may feel similarly about Brenton Cox and want to avoid that potentially happening and putting him on the 53-man roster to make sure he stays a part of this team. So something to keep our eyes on. As far as Cox's performance here in training camp, he's often been with the third-team defense, again, behind the 4 players that I just mentioned. At cornerback, this room's really starting to take shape as well on the back end. Of course, we know who the big 3 are right now: Douglas, Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon. Eric Stokes will be back in the mix at some point, given 4. Typically, we'll see the Packers keep 6 cornerbacks. 7 is possible, but again, that's going heavy at the position. In terms of who those 5th and 6th guys are, if we include Stokes being on the roster at this time, it's Corey Ballantyne and Carrington Ballantyne. Both have been the consistent, and this goes back to minicamp, consistent second-team defense boundary cornerback options. Both bring special teams upside, and Carrington Ballantyne in particular has had a really, really nice start to training camp. Had a pick 6 of Danny Etling during Monday's practice, and someone that Matt LaFleur has said has done an unbelievable job. If there's a question with this position group, it's Ennis Gaines, who's actually listed as a safety, but most of his time is spent playing in the slot. During Saturday's practice, he was working out during individual position drills with the cornerbacks, not the safeties. And he spent a lot of time in the slot with the second-team defense. So when we look at this cornerback room as a whole, ton of talent, ton of depth, but in terms of true nickel cornerback options, it's Keyshawn Nixon, and that's it. Razul, Stokes, Valentine, those are boundary cornerbacks. Jair Alexander, he's someone that you want playing wherever. You don't want to pigeonhole him only to the boundary or only to the slot. You want him lining up where the best receiver is. So in terms of building depth at the nickel position, potentially Gaines is someone who could fill that role. But again, in order to do so, it means keeping 7 cornerbacks, or let's transition to the safety position, potentially 6 safeties, which is something the Packers have not done since 2016. It's very unlikely. This room as well, ton of questions, but is really starting to take shape. Starters have been Savage and Rudy Ford. Jonathan Owens and Tavarius Moore have been with the second team. And again, I believe I've mentioned this on here before, or since training camp started, I cannot picture a Packers roster that does not include Dallin Levitt on it. Has spent his entire career playing under Rich Bisaccia here in Green Bay as well as Las Vegas. Core special teams contributor. And there were at least 2 occasions from last year that I can think of where Aaron Rodgers commented on Levitt's leadership presence in the locker room, which is certainly valuable, especially with just an overall young team that Green Bay has. So that's 5 right there. Again, keeping 6 seems unlikely. 7th-round pick Anthony Johnson. This would put him on the outside looking in. He's someone that's routinely been with the third-team defense going all the way back to offseason programs. And in addition to making the jump from college to the NFL and that transition, he's only in year 2 of playing safety. this is going to be a developmental year for him. And given what we've seen so far at this position group, I wouldn't be surprised if that comes on the practice squad. At linebacker, last defensive position group to cover. This group seems pretty well set as well. Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie. Those are the big three at the position. Obviously, Campbell and Walker are going to take the bulk of the snaps, but Isaiah McDuffie is someone who's established himself as linebacker 3. Eric Wilson has been with the second team defense and is a core special teams player. Tariq Carpenter is a core special teams player as well. He was one of the more productive players from that position group last season in terms of tackles. Keeping 5 linebackers is going heavy at the position. The Packers did only keep 4 a season ago. As I've said, Carpenter is someone who needs to carve out a role defensively. He's versatile, which is excellent, but young players need specific roles to tackle before having more added to their plate. Because of his special teams presence, I do think he makes the team, but again, 5 is not guaranteed by any means. So there you have it, friends. Those are my where I feel the key position battles at each position group currently stand. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work at Dairyland Express as well as Packers Wire. And please hit like, please hit subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.